Now in this lesson we're going to be talking about controlling the intensity of your color. You know, how strong, how gray to make your color, and why you would want to do either one. Certain reasons why you want to make your color a bit stronger, you know, how strong, how gray to make your color, and why you would want to do either one. Certain reasons why you want to make your color a bit stronger, a bit grayer. I'm going to look at some pictures that maybe need to be punched up a little bit, this one, and then some that need to be grayed down. So in this one we're talking about punching the colors up. We look at this photograph, this is in Sheridan, Wyoming, and it looks sunlit and the colors seem bright, but the problem would be if you copied these colors it would not look very sunlit, because you can't copy colors and make it look like the photograph. It's going to look like paint and it won't have the same feel. This is slightly muted. Everything's a little bit grayer in here. Sometimes the camera doesn't pick it up. Sometimes I will put it in Photoshop like this and I will knock down the intensity. I'll desaturate the color a little bit and then come back and push it where I want to. Like in this one, I want to push color in here and in the shadow. It's too blank, it's too white in the light area. It needs to be warmer. And the shadow's too dull. When we increase that intensity, we're going to get more suggestion of light. If I just have a dark and light, it can work as a black and white image, drawing, black and white painting, and still be effective. But when we're thinking color, it has to be more intense to make it jump out. And what we're wanting to do here in this image is to, again, increase the intensity, increase the chroma. Another photograph, we're going to look at decreasing it because it's too much in the photograph. So these are the changes I made. This is the equivalent of white and orange. Might have added a little cad yellow, so maybe white and yellow orange. And thicker than the dark, so it stands out more. Same thing with the shadows. A blue, slightly muted blue. Everything is still slightly muted, but it's more intense than what the photograph shows. And in some areas it's more simplified, which also makes the color look stronger. So I have stronger blue, stronger violet, and I have also right in here, I have a, selected right in there, I have some gray color, which I would do it in both of them. Even in the light area, I could come back with a little bit of either something cooler or something just slightly gray, long as it's the same value. When you put something grayer next to a stronger color, it becomes more effective. If everything is real bright, real intense, then it's all screaming at you and nothing really makes a statement. But if there's a little bit of just simple brush strokes of a grayer color, same value, it makes the brighter color look a bit more effective. Of course, all this is built upon having the right values in the planes. But again, color a little bit stronger, not so muted. Effectively meaning don't add as much of the complement. This area has a little more orange in it, whereas mine does not. My photoshopped color there is more of a white, ultramarine blue, maybe a little bit of cad red. There's some violet and yellow here, and it's slightly muted, but it's stronger than what's there. So everything's kind of relative too. I can put a slightly muted color next to a real gray color, and that slightly muted color looks bright, looks intense. Now same thing down here. I went ahead and pushed the color stronger in the lights. Also, I don't have as much white. This area here, the gravel, has a lot of white in it, or the photograph picked up a lot of light, and it gets a little chalky, kind of a gray chalky color. My color I have here is a white orange with just a touch of blue, or maybe violet. Violet will knock it down, but it won't gray it as much as blue will. So you can use the color next to the complement to gray your color. You don't have to use the exact complement all the time, and it won't gray it as much. And a real strong blue-violet here. This is blue with a little bit of alizarin crimson, maybe a touch of orange to mute it just slightly. And I can always gray it more once it's on the canvas. So again, looking at the barn and the road, you see the difference there. I've just increased the chroma, colors a bit stronger, but not a ton, and some gray strokes in there to make it pop out. Then going back to the background, back in here, we see the trees. The first thing I did, what helps the color, is to simplify the shape. The minute I can get a big dark shape, big light shape, the color's going to look stronger. So getting rid of detail, and I'm pushing this more of a blue-green because I want it to stay in the distance. But this is effectively, cooler, but without adding really any complement to it. This would be the equivalent of ultramarine blue and a tiny bit of cad yellow light. Not much. I could always add a little bit of orange if I needed to mute it, but the blue with just a little bit of yellow, it doesn't turn real green, just slightly, and it does mute it some, because ultramarine blue has a little bit of red in it, so it's technically a blue-violet, kind of, a little bit. So a little bit of yellow will great. Now a lot of yellow will turn real green, obviously. And then the lights here are just the same color, ultramarine blue, more cad yellow, and white. And that makes that lighter and warmer. And again, they are slightly muted just because ultramarine blue has a little red in it already. So that means the mixture is yellow, blue, and red and white. And all three of the primaries are going to gray each other just slightly. So simplifying the shape in this case, because it's the background, helps. And then real clean color. When you're using greens or seeing greens and using blue and yellow, keep in mind that it's going to be a little gray right from the beginning because blue has the blue has some red in it. And then I use kind of the same colors, only on the ground down here, a little bit lighter than the tree, because again, this is a slanted plane and the tree's vertical, so tree will be darker. And I also added a little bit of red to it. It's still a strong color. When I compare with what's there, mine's still a bit stronger. And then I added the equivalent of a little bit of viridian with a touch of yellow. Now that's real strong right in there. It's real strong, but if I just do a little bit, it won't hurt it too much, and it takes over and it comes forward because it's in the distance. But a little bit of strong color there actually makes the other greens look a little grayer and helps to harmonize the colors a bit more. Then in the background, looking up at the mountains, again, just the fact that I pull those darks together makes the color look cleaner. I really don't have any halftone up there. I just have all simple darker light. And again, blue with just a little bit of crimson and maybe a touch of orange. Not much. Mostly blue. Or blue with just a little bit of orange would probably work also. But blue has to dominate, and the blue has to be pretty strong. And it also has to be lighter than the shadow on the tree. So a big contrast difference between those two. And then a big contrast difference between the dark tree in the background and the dark shadow in the foreground. And when I look at it, it doesn't look like much, but I'll take a little bit of that color and put it on the shadow. They're both about the same value. So I would want to lighten this just a little bit. So that's usually how I test it. I'll take some of one value, put it on the canvas to see how the colors relate. Now the lights in there, again, pulling them together, you've got these real grayish muted rocks, and then also gray muted rocks up here. A lot of the color up in here is affected by the poor quality of the camera. Wasn't a great picture, so I just want to use colors that I know will stay in the distance and have the effect of distant sunlit cliffs. So a slightly muted orange. And again, you can have a color slightly grayed and still looks real strong, which I think it does up here. This looks very strong. Now the same orange, unmuted, so it'd be more like that. That's about the same value, and it has no blue in it. So I have quite a bit of blue in it, but it looks pretty strong because it's next to the real cool color. So you have that vibration of warm against cool, and the two colors look a little more vibrant, a little more stronger chroma. And then the blue-green here, which I compare to the two greens over here. And this has to be bluer, so more white and more ultramarine blue, which again deadens the yellow and the orange a little bit. It makes the blue pop out. So again, trying to increase the color here, because I know the photograph, if I copy it, is not going to have the same effect. And I'm really thinking in terms of temperature. Keeping the temperature cleaner, less complementary color to create more effective sunlight and shadow. Because that's what matters here is the temperature contrast, not the color. You know, I could have this white and yellow ochre, white and orange, white and red orange. Long as it's warm, it's going to work. I could even have this white and yellow green. It's just so much white. Doesn't matter what color I put in there as long as it's warm. And yellow green is a warm color. So now looking at a photograph that needs to be knocked down. The first one was a little too muted if I just copy it exactly, which I never like doing anyway. This one's too strong. Also taken with the iPhone. This one, darks go way too dark. And the greens in the light area are just really way too garish. They're too yellowy green. I like the contrast of dark and light, but I want to knock it down some. So I want to think in terms of the values on the flat plane down here, and then the values of the light on the tree in the dark. But the values in the tree are going to be a little darker than the values in the grass, both dark and light. Everything's going to be darker in the tree. So I want to remember that. Don't isolate the tree value and mix it real light, and then isolate the ground value and mix it real light. They're not going to work. You have to make sure as you mix the light that it's lighter than the value of the foliage and that the foliage is darker than the value in the grass. And this is the equivalent of, especially right in here, all of these colors are just way too intense. And even out in here, but not quite as bad, but way too much intensity. Somewhat the equivalent of using Viridian green or Viridian with a little cad yellow light. Or you get a tube of permanent green light, which is Viridian and yellow in a tube, and you just plop it on there, and it's way too intense. So I want to think of how can I make my focal point stand out more. And for me, the focal point's right in here in the barn, maybe this part of the barn and some of the roof sticking through in those other areas. So I want that to stick out. So I will intensify this color, which means I have to ignore the fact that it's a real reddish, a gray reddish violet. I mean, really gray. And I would pop it more, and then I would gray down the other colors. So these are the changes I made, making sure, since it is summer, and all the trees and grass can wind up the same green as you look at it. They're too close to the same green. So this lighter green up in here is blue and yellow with probably cad red light. This is a little more blue, a little less yellow, with maybe a little bit of alizarin crimson. I have no idea what they're going to look like. I just know these two will be different. So I mix them up, put them down. I just don't want them the same. And this might have a little bit of Viridian in it, but also ultramarine blue with a little yellow. And then I could use some cad red to gray it slightly. Sometimes I will add the red to the green to gray it. And other times I will add the red to the green just to make the green slightly different. So you can have different purposes for putting red into green. One is to really get it grayer, and the other is just to create a slightly different green from another green. Now I use some red orange in here to make the roof pop out. That's my focal point. And I could probably pop the sunlit area a lot stronger. Again, white, cad yellow, get it thicker. I would want this to be about my thickest paint. And I could pop that in there, and then in a few places get some small kind of holes where you're looking through the shrubbery and trees. Creates more interest, and then increase the intensity on this will be a bit too much. No, that's pretty strong, but it does pop out. If my goal in my color mixing is to make this area stick out more, that does make it stick out. And I kind of like it. I would rather put it in like this, and then after everything else is filled in, come back and scrub in a little bit of orange in there, which there would be anyway. The light would bounce into the shadow from the ground, and I could warm up the top of it just a little bit. But I do like the intensity here because this is real intense. This color is real intense. The orange on the roof is real intense. And everything else I muted, with the exception of this red plant. I needed a touch of color somewhere, so I stuck that in there. In the photograph, I think it's more of a orange shrubbery or something like that. But remember, we're the artists and we can do whatever the heck we want. So change the color. I got so much green, some kind of red, red violet, red orange works. And I already have red orange over here on the roof, so the red violet pops pretty good. And I did the equivalent of a real light yellow green with alizarin crimson in it to really knock down that grass. And I had different colors. There's some pale oranges, probably 2 or 3 values of pale orange that I would scrub in on the muted grass while it's still wet. It'll blend in nicely. Same thing, a little more bluish green with some red to knock it down, yellow green with red. So here, down below in here, the red is used to gray the green. Up here, the red is used just to give me a subtle difference in the greens. So you have different reasons for adding the complement in greens. It helps to kind of be precise about what you're thinking. But this punches the color where I want it to, again, right in there, and then everything else around there is a lot more muted. So you look at the difference. Here the barn kind of sinks away. The greens are really strong, and now the greens are more muted. And the barn's lighter, and the color's brighter around the barn. So think through those things as you're looking at your reference, how you want to either mute the color or intensify it. And when you intensify it, remember you have to have grays in there. And I will generally just mix a gray, blue and orange, whatever value it needs to be, and I'll add it to the real bright color. Just a few strokes around the bright area. And that really makes it look brighter, but less garish because there's some grayer color there to affect it. So I've got a couple of paintings here. This is a Fyodor Zakharov. He was a Soviet impressionist. And he used a lot of real strong color and grays, both at the same time. So when we look at his painting, like you can see in here, that gray next to the warm white. A lot of gray stuff in here, probably just mixtures in the palette of graying things up. I just like the way he paints, uses brushwork, because he doesn't really care what it is he's painting. It's all about paint and composition and color. But even in the blue sky, it's real strong, but there's a few strokes of muted grayish blue. Not much, and it doesn't cover all the sky, just a few strokes, and that calms the whole sky down, but yet it still looks real bright. A good combination of his work of both gray and intense color. The other two are John Carlson's paintings, and he also really aware of color harmony, and you can usually pick out there's areas of real strong color in the green, a strong violet, a little touch of color on there. So kind of scattered around, but in between the strong areas of color, he has the grayer color. You can see the grayer color on the trunks, the grayer color in the bare branches up in here, some grays. And gray doesn't have to mean just black and white looking gray. It gets a real gray blue, gray red, gray violet. So a good combination of stronger and grayer colors. You can't have one without the other. And this is another Carlson. And really gray back in here. It allows this slightly more red, a little bit more intense color of the red tree there, the dots and dashes of the green and red of the foliage next to the grayer trunks. And in snow, he used a lot of strong blues in the shadows to offset some warm, muted colors in the sunlit snow. So as you're thinking of the colors for your big areas, mix up some gray so that you can kind of control the intensity. Not to let it get too bright or too gray. But kind of control it and decide where you want your strongest color to be.